Good day, everyone! So, here we have our third lesson, the critical period hypothesis. But before we start in this lesson, let's just have a little recap and connect it to our previous lesson as well. So, our previous lesson was the first language acquisition versus the second, the language acquisition. So, in that lesson, we talked about different process and the different stages in language acquisition, as well as what do we mean by second language acquisition, what do we mean by learning, and what do we mean by acquisition, as well as the different methods in teaching second language or teaching a second language. Now, in the processes and stages of language acquisition, I told you the importance of critical stages or the specific time frame or time period in a child's life. And these critical stages is connected, or what is basically the critical period hypothesis. So, what do we mean by critical period hypothesis? So, the critical period hypothesis is a very debated topic, not just only in language acquisition, but also in linguistics as a whole. Over what? What is the debate all about? It is all about whether or not our ability to learn language, our capability to learn language, is connected to our age. Meaning to say, if we pass a certain age, let's say I'm already 16 and I did not experience the cooing stage or the babbling stage or the one word stage or the two word stage in the language acquisition process or stages, then can I still learn it? Or do I still have a chance to learn it even if I want to? Or am I unable to learn it anymore since it has already passed, or that critical stage is already long gone since I'm already an adult? So that is basically what CPH or the critical period hypothesis is all about. That is what it is trying to answer. And again, hypothesis, so it is only a theory, meaning not yet proven true. Okay. So, if language input does not occur until after this time, the individual will never achieve a full command of language, especially grammatical systems. So yeah, as I was saying earlier, if I pass that certain point, can I or will I never be able to use? And according to this theory, the critical period hypothesis, if you passed a certain period and did not experience it, then you will lose that ability forever, making you unable to fully master language, especially in grammatical systems or in grammar. So let's talk about the historical background of this hypothesis. So this hypothesis was first theorized or was first asked by Wilder Penfield and his co-author Lamar Roberts during 1959. So the main study of this hypothesis at first was the study of neuroscience of language. And according to their study, to their research, to them, a child can learn multiple language up to age 9. So meaning to say, from age 0 years old, up to 9 years old, we as children, or back then as children, and if you have any sons, daughters, niece, and other or neighborhood children, and they're 0 to 9 years old, they have the ability to learn multiple language. Let's say their mother is a Russian, their father is an American, their tita is a Filipino, their tito is Bisaya, from Visayas. And since they are always, or the child is always with those people, he is able to acquire. Again, if you still remember first language acquisition, is able to slowly learn what the words mean, how is it used, and slowly construct sentences. Very easily, or because as children, they are still much open to anything, and so maybe up to 0 to 9 years old, a child can learn English, Russian, Tagalog, and Visayan languages if they are exposed to those languages or if they are taught those languages. Okay. Next contributor to the hypothesis is Eric Lenneberg. When? 1967. So, he studied CPH in his book Biological Foundations of Language. So, according to him, children having a certain amount of time to acquire a language. So, if you still remember in our first lesson, the origins of language, so the creation of language is gradually, not instant, unless it's from the mutation theory and the divine gift theory. But other than those, the other theory says that language is a gradual evolution. Similar to our acquiring and learning as well as understanding language. It's not instant, I know Tagalog, everything about Tagalog. Instant, I know English, I can use English very well. No. There is a time period where you slowly learn the words, how to construct sentences, and how to construct sentences properly in a both grammatically and in a social context as well. And according to Eric Lenneberg, so up to age 13, language is present in both hemispheres. So meaning to say, a child or infant children can learn multiple languages or they can learn language easily up to the age of 13. And so, first, what do we mean by a child? So, there are many definitions. I have some people that say that a child is only up to 12 years old. Since the number 13, we have the word teen. So, the child is no longer a child. The child is a teenager already. And I know some people that says that a child is no longer a child once their age is already double digits. So meaning to say, if the child is already 10 years old, then the child is no longer a child or he is already a young adult. So similar to that, we have Wilder Penfield, according to him, up to age 9, and Eric Lenneberg, according to him, 13. So they have their own opinion of whether or what age does a child has limits in learning language. So moving on. Next is Noam Chomsky. So according to Noam Chomsky, children are born with an inherited ability to learn any human language. So every child has a language acquisition device or LAD. So according to Noam Chomsky, all children has the innate ability to learn any, the word is any, human language. So like my example earlier, so if a child is exposed to multiple languages during his childhood, then that child has a chance to learn multiple languages and use them during his or her adulthood. So inherited ability or innate ability. So we're going to connect this on the first lesson, the origins of language. One of the theories is the genetic theory or genetic mutation. According to that theory, we humans had the ability to use or speak language because there was a mutation in our DNA. And in that mutation, it gave us an innate ability to speak and use language. Why? Because of that mutation, we gained a language acquisition device. So similar what Noam Chomsky has said. And since we have that language acquisition device, we are able to learn language. Yeah. So further supportive studies. So in the early 1960s, Chomsky had launched his idea that humans have an innate language capacity. And around the same time, a neuropsychologist, Eric Lenneberg, accepting Chomsky's claim. Lenneberg's reasoning was based on the notion of lateralization. So Chomsky had support, or he had backup, and that backup came from a neuropsychologist, Eric Lenneberg. Again, it stated there that Chomsky's idea is that humans had an innate ability. So we really had the ability to use language. And why is it possible? Why was he able to get support from a neuropsychologist? It is because of the term, or because of what we know as the notion of lateralization. So moving on, we have what we call feral children. So of course, you're going to scratch your heads. What do you mean by feral? So we will be learning that later in the video. So here we have two samples of feral children. First is we have Victor, the wild boy of Avron. He was found in 1798. And the second one is in 1970, a girl named Jenny. So as you can see here, we have the picture of Victor and a photography. Maybe this is a drawing, this is a picture or a photo of Jenny. So Victor was found during 1798, and since that was in a very, very long time ago, we have very little record about him. But Jenny, on the other hand, since she was a child born during the 1970s, we already have computers back then. We have pictures, we have cameras already back then. And so we have much information about her. So we will talk about her in a video later. So let's first know Jenny a little bit in descriptions first. So she was locked away from normal civilization and was undeveloped physically and emotionally. So remember those words. She was undeveloped physically and emotionally. Jeannie was an infant who was trapped in a 13-year-old body because she could only make infant-like sounds and no words or sentences. So even though Jenny was already 13 years old, she was still considered an infant, a baby. Why? Because she was trapped, not being able to be part of normal civilization or normal society. And because of that, she was not able to learn to speak when the authorities found her. What can she only do? Only make sounds, noises, not even words, and especially not even sentences. So continuing, so after the authorities was able to find out about her, rescue her, and take good care of her. So of course, she learned how words and how to talk a bit. The word is a bit. So here are some examples of the words that she spoke or the sentences that she was able to say. So first is Jenny full stomach. Father take piece wood hit cry. Want milk? And Jenny bad cold leave father house. So as you can see, Jenny full stomach. The idea is there, but we know that there is some words missing. Especially here in the second one. Father take wood hit cry. So again, we know the message that the father took a piece of wood, hit her, and she cried. But there are missing words. So it is part of the critical period hypothesis. So effects. So where do the critical period hypothesis is most especially seen? What are the effects if a person miss a critical period in their life? So one of the things that will be affected is, first of all, phonology. So there is a narrow period of acquisition of segments of a language. This period is very important for the exposure to audial input. So according to this, in learning phonology, the critical period is during the first 5 years. If a person miss this chance to learn phonology, then they will be having a hard time in identifying words audially, sounds by sounds. Phonology or pronunciation. Next, syntax and grammar. So syntax and grammar are also required in a specific period. So 0 to 12 years old is the critical period to a child in order to learn both syntax and grammar. So using Jenny again as our subject, so Jenny completed her childhood without having been exposed to her mother tongue. So to her native language. She couldn't produce grammatically correct sentences. And this can be seen from our examples here. As you can see. Even though there is the message, but it is not grammatically correct. So grammar, both syntax and especially grammar, is affected if a person missed a critical period in their life. Next, semantics. So unlike phonology, syntax, and grammar, semantics is not much affected. Although it is still affected, but not much. So according to this, semantics is not much affected by the critical age period hypothesis. Although Jenny couldn't acquire the syntax, she was able to learn some vocabularies of her language. So meaning to say, even if you have been locked up from your childhood up to, let's say, 30 or 40s, you are still able to learn words. So that's why semantics is not much affected. Although yes, it is affected. Why? Because you have a limited word bank. You have a very limited words to choose from in saying a sentence. But still, you are able to learn slowly but surely as well. Also, CAPH is not just important for verbal language. It is also important for non-verbal language. Again, the word is language. Verbal language, non-verbal language. So, meaning to say, it is still part. So, in CPH, it still affects the learning of sign language. So, according to this, you are much more better in learning how to use your hands or your mouths in sign language during 0 to 6 years old. After 6 years old, you're still able to learn. But the word is learn. Unlike acquiring. So you're still able to learn, but you will be having a hard time. So as early as possible, if you want to learn sign language, do it during the ages of 0 up to 6 years old. So of course, like I said, like the idea of what do we mean by child, is it 13, 12, 10, or so on and so forth. There are different ideas. And in what is the limit or threshold that a child should learn a language? What is the specific age limit in which if that child did not learn language in that time span, then they will have a hard time or they will never be able to learn language. So according to Krashen, it's only up to 5 years old. When it's already 6 years old, the child will have a hard time or the child will never learn a language. According to Pinker, 6 years old, up to 6 years old. According to Lenneberg, it's 12 years old. And lastly, according to Johnson and Newport, it's up to 15 years old. Okay, moving on. Yeah. So moving to our video, I have prepared here a video, though I will give you the links. Oops. So this is the documentary about Jenny. So kindly listen, and I will pause it in certain points of the video in order for us to discuss what has been said and how we connect it to the critical period hypothesis. Okay.
Officials in the Los Angeles suburb of Arcadia have taken custody of a 13-year-old girl, and they say was kept in such isolation by her parents that she never even learned to talk. The girl still wore diapers and was uttering infantile noises. A social worker discovered the case 2 weeks ago. But the authorities are hoping she still may have a normal learning capacity.
Among the first to see the child was Temple City Detective Sergeant Frank Lindley.
I already knew that the child was 13 and a half years old. And I took one look at her, and she wasn't much bigger than my daughter Beverly, who had just turned 7 3 months earlier. And I really had a hard time conceiving of the idea that the child was the age that she was. The child obviously had been severely mistreated. She was still in diapers, couldn't walk. She had no verbal skills at all at that point. The last time I was on this street was probably 30 years ago. And there it is. Hasn't changed much. The backyard looks the same. It's all weeds and dead grass. Looks the same as it did in 1970.
The house belonged to Clark Wiley. A loner, Clark had turned his back on the world after his mother had been killed in a hit-and-run accident. After the accident, things in the Wiley house would never be the same again.
The house was completely dark. All the blinds were drawn. There were no toys, no clothes, nothing that would ever indicate to you that a child at any age lived there. The child's bedroom was back in this corner. That was the bedroom. The windows were covered to about 3 inches from the top, which was the only natural light that had ever come in there, and all the time the child was in the bedroom. The entire furnishings of the bedroom consisted of a cage with a pull-down chicken wire lid and some type of piece of wire securing it when they closed it down. There was a potty chair with some kind of homemade strapping device
For 13 years, Jeannie had spent her nights locked in bed. Her days...
Okay, so let's first talk about what has been said. So, try to imagine a child, 13 years old already, still in diapers. So, just let that sink in your head. So, still in diapers when the authorities found her. So, if you notice earlier, there was a specific window that was being shown. So, that was the only window in Jenny's room. And in the house where she lived, it was really, really dark. No toys. So, meaning to say, the people did not know that there was a child living in that house. So, what was inside the room of Jenny? So, only 3 things. A cage. Oh, mind this. A cage. Of course, a bed. And a toilet seat. So, Jenny was, during at nights, was tied to the bed. The word is tied. She was not just simply lying on the bed. She was tied on the bed. And during the days, it's either she is locked up in a cage, like an animal, or tied again. The word is tied to the toilet seat. And the only natural light source for her is this window, which is also blocked by a curtain. So all the curtains of the house are closed. So it's like this. So the house is already dark and there is only a limited light source. So again, I want you to remember the word earlier. She was undeveloped both physically and emotionally. So we can see already emotionally. Why? Because she was not treated like a child. She was treated like an object, like an animal. She was tied to toilet chairs, beds, and physically, she was undeveloped. Why? Because all her life, she was only a caged person, a tied person. And even though when we go out, we are always afraid of the sunlight, because if too much sun will make you dark, will burn your skin, give you cancer cells. Still, sunlight is very important for us. Why? Because it gives us specific vitamins. I believe it's vitamin D. I don't remember, but there is a specific vitamins. So, all her life, this was her only light source. So, a very limited amount of vitamin D. Okay. So, continuing.
strapped to a potty chair. During that time, Clark had ordered his son John and wife Irene never to talk to her. In her darkened room, she had led a life of near total isolation. Even close neighbors were completely unaware of her presence.
We came home from work and the police was there and they came to question us. That's when we found out, what happened and, that they had a little girl. Nobody knew before. And when we found out what happened and how she was treated, everybody was shocked and just unbelievable.
For their whole marriage, Clark had imposed his will on Irene, and blind with cataracts, she had been too scared to resist. But one day, something broke. While Clark was out buying groceries, she seized her chance and fled. It was the first glimpse the world would have of Clark and Irene's dark secret.
I met Clark and Irene at Temple City Sheriff's Station. They were both under arrest at the time. When we interviewed Irene, she would make no mention of the family whatsoever, particularly the children. I attempted, along with my partner, to interview Clark, He refused to talk to us. He wouldn't say a word. He never even acknowledged that he understood what we were talking about.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
why did you keep your daughter in the room?
Mr. Wiley has no comment. We haven't had time to discuss the charge. We haven't even seen them.
Unable to face the truth, Clark took matters into his own hands.
This morning, the authorities reported that 70-year-old Clark Wiley shot and killed himself just before he was to go to court and be arraigned for child abuse.
After 13 years, Jeannie was at last free.
Okay. So, before we continue the video, so let's first talk about her, again, condition in life. So, let's recap. So, what did Jenny experience? Being treated like an object, like an animal, not being given freedom, or even the proper sunlight or nutrients to that matter. And now we found out that her father is a very controlling man. So for those who has love lives, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wives, there, on the other side of those people watching this video, so don't be too controlling. Give them some space, some freedom. Okay, so the husband, Clark Wiley, was very controlling. He ordered his son and his wife not to talk to the girl. So just imagine that. Imagine that. For 13 long years, only him, only the father had any contact or have contact to Jenny. Meaning to say, the wife or the son might not even know what Jenny looks like. Or Jenny might not even know what her mother or her brother looks like, because her father ordered the two not to talk to her. And so we can connect it to the CPH. According to CPH, if a person missed a specific time frame and not learn, let's say did not experience cooing, did not experience bubbling, 1-word stage, 2-word stage, semantics stage, then they will never able to learn what should be learned during that stage. And Jenny was alive for 13 long years and no one talked to her. So that's why, as we can see in the descriptions earlier, she was a 13-year-old girl, but she was an infant because she was not able to use words or speak words, only make sounds. And since she was not able to speak words at all, she can't really speak sentences at all as well. She can only mewl or only squeak or cry like an infant, even though she was already 13 years old. So as you can see, she really had a very bad childhood experience growing up. So moving on, continuing the story, the video.
And for scientists, she was just the case they had been waiting for. For 13 years, Jeannie had lived a life of complete isolation. Raised in a city bedroom, Jeannie was as much a feral child as if she had been brought up by wolves. At 13, she was the size of a 6-year-old. Worst of all, she had never been taught to speak. The question now, could she ever learn? Jeannie's case was so scientifically important that the government funded a team of scientists to help answer the many questions she posed. Two of the scientists who would become especially important to Jeannie were child psychologist James Kent and linguist Susan Curtis. Neither had ever encountered a case as extreme as Jeannie's.
Okay, so before we continue the video, again, let's So Jeannie, after 13 long years, was finally freed. But before we continue, again, just a small trivia. Jeannie was so locked up that no one knew that she was even there, that she even existed. The neighbors did not know. The only time that they knew or they found out about her is when the authority, the police, came to the house. So they were curious, chismosa, and they talk about what happened. And because of that, they learned that there was a child locked up in that. So now, Jenny is freed. Freed to see the outside world. And for the outside world to see Jenny as well. And because of this, she is also the perfect specimen, the perfect sample. Whether or not some of the questions, some of the theories, including the critical period hypothesis or theory, is really true, or is it false as well. So it is a perfect time to answer those hypotheses, those theories. And Jenny was the perfect sample to use to find out from whether or not these hypotheses or these theories are correct, plausible, or incorrect. So as you can see in the picture, the scientist wanting to know her brain strapped multiple cables to just see or have an x-ray of her mental condition. And later, we will see her mental condition. Okay, moving.
We look at her as a newborn in a way, even though we know she came with 13 years of memories and experiences, not all of them wonderful, most of them not, I think. And so we thought we needed to start to expose her to what the world was going to be like for her outside the hospital bed.
To Jeannie, everything was a new experience.
What you would do with your own kids if you were introducing them to the world. You take them out and hold them